Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series of live career webinars brought to you by the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal. That is hopinto.co.uk, and on your screens at the moment you should see details of the website and indeed our social media handles. Now, the HOP has been created specifically for students and young people living in Hertfordshire or going to school or college in Hertfordshire, and it's there to try and help you make some decisions to find out about jobs and opportunities that exist within the county. So firstly, for those of you that are watching this live at the moment, well done for coming home from school, registering to attend a webinar and then coming in and joining it. Really, really pleased that you can make it, and really hope that this next hour or so is going to be really useful for you in helping you make some really crucial decisions about your future. Now, just to give you a bit of housekeeping about how this works, we can't see or hear any of you that are watching this live, but hopefully you can see and hear us quite clearly. You do, however, have the opportunity to ask questions. So to Chloe and Andy, who I'll introduce in a moment, they are your experts here because they are working in business administration, or they are supporting a company whose staff work in business administration. So they will have all the answers to the questions that you might have about what the job looks like. Now, we'll try and uncover those at to start with, but if there's anything that we discussed that you think you want to know a little bit more about, you can do that. So the way you do that is on your dashboard on your screens, you should see there's a tab there that says questions. On that questions tab, if you click the box, it'll open it out, and then you can type into that your question. That's only visible to me, and then I will direct the question through to either Chloe or Andy, depending on who you want that question to go to. So this is a really good opportunity for you to ask those questions that may really help you. So today's session is going to be talking about careers in business administration, and the good news is that pretty much every company in Hertfordshire, no matter whether they're large or small, no matter what industry they're in, they require people to do their business administration skills. So this is a job or a potential career or role that you could go into that's desperately going to be needed, no matter what your skills or what your interests are. So we're going to unpick a little bit of that today. We'll talk about how you get into the role, or how do you get jobs such as the one that Chloe's doing at the moment, and hopefully we'll give you an idea of the sorts of courses or the sorts of subjects or choices you might need to make as you're going through school. This session is being recorded. If you can't stay with us to the end of it, it will be available on our YouTube channel from tomorrow. That is on the HOT page, and you'll be able to watch all the previous webinars that we've run as previously. Before I get started, though, I'd really like to introduce my two panelists, though. So I'm going to ask both Chloe and Andy in turn just to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about them. So first of all, Chloe, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Could you tell everyone a little bit about you?
Of course. So my name's Chloe Dinage. I'm currently an administrator at Roche. I completed a business admin apprenticeship last year, which was about a year long, and yeah. That's me.
Yeah. So, well, Chloe, I mean, just to go back, tell everybody, where did you go to school? And I mean, just tell them briefly what happened from the moment you picked up your A-level results. That's quite an interesting story.
Yeah. So I went to school at Stanborough in Wellingon City, and I did my A-levels, and I studied Spanish, psychology, and history at A-levels. When I got my results, they weren't quite what I wanted or was hoping for, but I did have a university place secured. However, after receiving my results, I decided that university wasn't for me. It's something that had been brewing for a while anyway, and then the results just, you know, it said to me, maybe another 3 years of full-time education isn't the right path for me. So I withdrew my application, cancelled all my accommodation, student finance and everything, and then, yeah, went, what's next? My part-time job, which was at Boots at the time, became a full-time job for a couple of years while I was trying to find my way into the admin sort of area, because that's what really interested me. And then that's when I landed the apprenticeship, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we're going to explore that in a bit more detail later in the webinar, Chloe. Good afternoon, Andy. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, Gareth. And again, thanks for your kind invite to come along to the session today. Yeah, my name's Andy Baker. I'm the HR manager for early careers recruitment at MBDA. For those that don't know us, we're a defence company based in Hertfordshire, Stevenage, Hertfordshire. Just to give you a sort of paint a picture, we are a defence company, but the reason that Gareth's kindly invited me along is that within lots of employees within business and our apprenticeship schemes, we do have an awful lot that are dedicated to business or in and around that business kind of description as well. So it's quite broad, as I'm sure Gareth and Chloe, no doubt will discuss as we go forward. And just to add from our perspective as well, just to give you some context in terms of how many young people we bring into the business, typically about 220 young people we bring into the UK business every year. So that's me.
Yeah, so there's a very good chance that when you go for your first job, as one of your early jobs, you're going to come across somebody like Andy, and more importantly, Andy's going to come across you. So what we can explore in this webinar today is the sorts of things that Andy would be looking for from you when you go through that application process, which you're all going to do. Some of you might be going through it sooner rather than later. Okay, so thank you to our panelists. The first section, or the first things that we really want to talk about is, what does it mean to be in business administration? So, look, Chloe, I'm going to throw this straight over to you. You mentioned that you work for Roche Pharmaceuticals, but I'm guessing, do you have anything to do with pharmaceuticals in your role?
Not hands-on, no. So the business administration role is essentially business support. So whatever that looks like, you know, it could be anything from financy stuff to events management, project management, to process, you know, following processes, onboarding new people. Yeah, it's a really broad role, and yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, Andy, just by contrast, MBDA does very, very different things operationally to Roche. But as you said, you've got a large business administration team. So what sort of things do your business administration team do over in Stevenage?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, Chloe sort of touched on how broad it can be, but for us, it covers a multitude of sins, really, Gareth. So it could be project management, as Chloe's mentioned. It could be commercial activities and contractual agreements, etc. It could be procurement and supply chain activities as well. It could be sales and business development, for argument's sake, as well. I work in the HR team, so it could be HR, it could be recruitment, it could be finance, as Chloe has also referred to. So in our world, it comes in different shapes and sizes. And again, I know we'll come on to this, I'm sure, Gareth, but each of those elements and each of those areas will have very similar core common skills and typical behaviors and etc. and strengths that we look for. But equally, some of those will be very bespoke and very niche in terms of the strengths we look for. So again, the opportunity, is, you can see, is quite vast.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, Chloe, let's really add some detail to what you just said there. I mean, tell us, what things have you been working on today? What does an average day look like for you?
So I would say no 2 days are the same, really. But an average day. So this morning I came in, I was sorting through my inbox, you know, trying to sort out the priorities for the day. What needs to be done today? What can be left and isn't as important? I had a training session this morning for a development project that I'm doing, and then I had some work to do around some onboarding. So I help to coordinate the onboarding for Welling, and also we have a site in Switzerland. So basically I will run reports, find out who started in the last month, make sure that they're receiving the invites to the onboarding program. Yeah. And what else have I done today?
Well, just explain what you mean by onboarding.
Okay, yes. So obviously when you start in any business, you're going to have some kind of onboarding program, which is basically just so the onboarding for this one is, it goes through what product development is and what drug development is, because that's what we do as a business. So it's for these new starters to come in and to complete that program so that they have some level of understanding of what the business does. So it gives the business context.
Yeah, sure. So Andy, I mean, it sounds like what Chloe's saying there is that business admin, that they are there and they are an essential part of any business, because they're really doing all those sort of core skills and doing those core duties that the business needs to operate. So in your business, for example, you've got some people who are making missiles, you need that business admin team in the middle there to make sure that what contracts are right and you've got the right people working for you.
There's all manner of things, Gareth, I have to say, and I would add to that business support in our world is crucial. And the business couldn't function, couldn't deliver in terms of our UK and overseas customer. They couldn't without business support. This is quite a broad summary, but I think that we see business support as being the kind of we have lots of pieces of jigsaw. The easiest way to put it, we have lots of pieces of a jigsaw in our business, and the business support bring all those pieces of jigsaw together. That's a nice, easy way of doing it. So if you haven't got something that does that, the piece of the jigsaw becomes irrelevant because it's not joined up and it's not particularly useful to the business. It doesn't support our delivery. So in our world, absolutely crucial. I mean, they play a pivotal part in our delivery and our success.
Sure. Okay. Now, both Andy and Chloe, you represent large organisations, so some of the larger organisations within Hertfordshire. So, Andy, just give us an idea, how big would the business admin team be in Stevenage? So, how many people would be working as part of that team?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in a UK workforce, we have about 4,500 people. In Stevenage, we have about 2,200 people that work in Stevenage now. And I would suggest that 25% of those, maybe 30% of those are business support.
Okay, so from my crude maths, that's possibly somewhere a team up to about 50, possibly between 30 and 50.
No, more than that. So we've got 2,500 in the UK, and about 30% of those are business support. So I would hazard a guess 700 are business support in Stevenage.
Wow. Okay. And then, so Chloe, presumably you are part of quite a big team. Then it's not you doing it by yourself.
No, it's not. But we are, so if we're just taking the Welling site, I think it's about 1,500. And of that, maybe about 80 are admins. Yeah.
So it's quite a big operation then, isn't it? Chloe, what's the best parts of your job? What's the things that you enjoy most?
Gosh, big question. I love the variety and I love to help people, and I think that's why I love my job, because it doesn't matter what someone will come to me with, I'll just do my absolute best to help them in whatever the situation, and that's, yeah, and it's then the gratitude that comes out of that.
Yeah. Okay. And can you give me for example, what's the sort of thing that someone might ask you from one of the sort of many functions and teams within Rush?
So an example would be someone comes to me, they've I mean, not in this climate, but someone's been traveling, for example, and they've got X amount of expenses they need processing, but they haven't done it in 2 years. It would be me that they come to help walk them through the process and make sure it's something we all have to do. It's a really menial task. Nobody wants to be sat there reconciling expenses, but it's me that they come to and walk them through the process, and to have that done and be a problem solver and help sort all of that out.
Yeah, sure. And then Andy, I'm going to ask you the flip of that question, was what would you say are the more challenging aspects of being in a business admin role? So what are the things that maybe people wouldn't think of or wouldn't be aware of?
Great question. I think you know what, I think the most obvious one is terminology. I know we use a lot of acronyms in our world, and that's quite confusing for people that come into the business as a new person. But I think just terminology, I think sometimes that business talk, for want of a better term, can throw people quite a bit, I have to say. But I'm sure the same with Roche as well. I would imagine that we do an awful lot of work in, whether you're an experienced hire or if you're an apprentice, we do an awful lot of work to try and make that a little bit more of an easier transition to understand what the hell are we talking about. What does contract management mean? What does supply performance mean, and so on and so forth. So I would say that's the trickiest thing in the first 6 months, I would suggest.
Yeah, okay. Has that been your experience, Chloe, or are there any other challenges to your role that you think it's worth highlighting?
Yeah, I would completely agree that coming in, as I came from a retail background and coming into a big corporate pharmaceutical company, it can be quite overwhelming, and it is a completely different language that you basically have to learn. But also, just to highlight, I think it's, as I said, inherently, if you're in this kind of role, you love to help people, but you have to be able to say no at some point. And that has taken some time to learn. So it's being able to prioritize and time manage, and then sometimes say, actually, no, I can't help with that right now, but maybe someone else can.
Yeah, sure. Just want to find out a little bit more about the environment that maybe you work in. And I know that you're now back in the office, Chloe, and Andy, I suspect some of your staff are all starting to come back into your offices now. But Chloe, I mean, how much time do you spend in front of a computer behind a desk? And, how much time are you up and about? what was that working environment like for you?
I mean, in how we're working now, obviously, because a lot of it is still virtual and hybrid, so it is probably more time spent in front of a screen than what would be normal. Pre-COVID, it would be a lot more dynamic and a lot more, team huddles and brainstorm sessions and all that sort of thing. So yeah, a bit more than normal in front of a screen, but it's still very collaborative and very team driven and all of that.
Sure. Okay. And I mean, in terms of dress code, I mean, is it sort of office wear? And if so, could you just explain to the people watching this what we mean by office wear, Andy?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we don't have an official dress policy at MBDA, for example. So most people typically come, certainly in business support, typically dependent on their working day, whether or not have external engagements or meetings or customer interactions. That would be a little bit more kind of smart, I guess. But typically a day for us, if you're just working with your colleagues, it's a real smart, casual type of approach for us, Gareth.
Yeah. Okay. So sort of shirt and collar probably for men, but not necessarily a tie. And, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, essentially, you can see for me, I've got a reasonably casual shirt on, and typically, pair of chinos, maybe a pair of trousers, and that's kind of it. I mean, some people wear ties, but it's quite rare now, to be fair, unless you're doing a customer meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, just going to move the conversation on now to the sorts of, or the ways of getting into this sort of role. So first of all, Chloe, you told us that you did Spanish, psychology and history at A-level.
Yeah.
Is that right? Now, I know, obviously, are there any obvious subjects or are there any areas from those subjects that you think help you in your job now?
To be honest, not completely. I think sometimes the psychology can come into it because of the working culture and some of the projects and stuff that we have going on internally. But I think mostly it would just be having English and maths and then some IT, ability from GCSE level that is useful.
Yeah, okay. Andy, let me throw this question to you because you will be looking through probably hundreds, if not thousands, of applications every year for people to come into this sort of role. Are there any particular A levels or even GCSEs that you'd be particularly looking out for?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you ask me that question with regards to engineering, we're quite precise and specific about the type of A levels we're looking for. But for business, we keep it literally open to any subjects, which may surprise some people. But I know we'll come onto this, Gareth, I'm sure. But we're not just driven by the academia. Certainly for business, we're looking for the personality and the strengths and the behaviours fit more so than the academia. So for us, just to give you our perspective, if a degree apprenticeship in our world in business, it's any subject at A-level or BTEC.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And then, I mean, just thinking about GCSEs, presumably you're looking for people to have a decent knowledge of maths and English, but not necessarily experts in those fields.
Absolutely. In New World, it's typically sort of grade 5 or above in English and maths, and that's sufficient for us. Five GCSEs in general, but certainly English and maths have to be grade 5 or above.
Okay. And what would that demonstrate to you? So if you know someone's got those grades, how does that make them appropriate and have the right skill level to be able to work for you?
Great question. I think when we look at business, it comes, to give you an example. So contract management is clearly led by a lot of written work, if you like. So we have to have a level of confidence that the individual has in my opinion, an average level of competence in English, of course, in terms of writing in particular, and by extension, communication is quite key in our business as well. So it's not just written; it has to be the verbal communication as well. And I think English, for us, grade 5 gives us that little bit of reassurance, bit of confidence. They have that ability to take that next step up, if you like. And the same with maths. It doesn't come as a great shock. Finance. A lot of maths and some of our contract negotiation will have an element of maths in that in terms of negotiation and costings, etc. So again, that level of competence would be that level 5 gives us that level of security, for want of a better term.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Chloe, just thinking about the sort of tasks you do on a day-to-day basis, how useful or how often are you using sort of GCSE level maths and English skills?
Daily, I think. definitely the English, and obviously some level of IT techie ability. We use Google Suite, so that's mainly what they look for at hiring. But yeah, English is definitely a big one because communication is so important, especially in corporate businesses. You need to be able to communicate clearly with stakeholders.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so going to the next step down the line at the moment, if people are finishing college or they're finishing sixth form and they're thinking, what are my next steps? You know, as you were, Chloe, not that long ago, and you were considering going to university. Andy, to join a business administration team, whether that's in MBDA or Roche or any of the companies around Hertfordshire, would going to university and having a degree give you a significant advantage?
It's a great question. I think in our world, because our degree apprenticeships, to give you a little bit of context in our world, you would need to have come from A levels, and we take you on to that next step into university naturally for the degree apprenticeship. If you're asking me for experience higher world and in business support, do you need to have a degree? The answer is categorically no. If you've come from A levels, even GCSEs historically in the last 5 years, 10 years, if you haven't got A levels or you haven't got a BTEC, for example, does that stop you going into our world? No, it doesn't. When you have entry level positions, i.e. a HNC, HND apprenticeship or business degree apprenticeship in our world, then it becomes crucial for us to have an understanding of your a baseline level of academic achievement. That gives us, again, going back to my original point, a level of confidence. But I would stress, in our world, we're not driven by the academia. It's driven by your strengths and what you enjoy and what you love doing and where your passion is, etc. We take that out of the application and the assessment process more so than we do from the academia.
Yeah, okay, no, good answer. So what we're saying here is that going to university and getting a degree is certainly not essential to getting a job in business administration. Now, of course, we wouldn't want to discourage anyone from going to university. There are many good reasons for going, not just about the academic qualifications that get you. And Chloe, obviously, you were very, very tempted to go to university, and you were perhaps very close to going. So I know you said that you'd actually had an offer in as well. Now, you found an apprenticeship role. So could you just explain to everybody, what does the apprenticeship actually entail, and how did you find it in the first place?
So the apprenticeship itself, so generally with apprenticeships, the setup is you work 80% of the time and then study 20% of the time. So that for me was, I worked Monday to Thursday and had a study day on a Friday. And that was to complete my assignments or have meetings with my tutors or whatever that looked like. In terms of how I found it, I had a mutual connection that knew that I was wanting to get into an admin-based role, and they signposted me. They worked at Roche and they signposted me to the role. So that's how I found it. Yeah.
So from looking at HOP, and I'm going to encourage all of you to go and have another look at HOP, but looking on there for the opportunities and current vacancies in Hertfordshire, I can see that there are multiple current business administration apprenticeships that are currently available. Now, of course, Andy, you offer business administration apprenticeship routes into the industry. What does the format of that apprenticeship actually look like? So what level is someone going to be studying at, and what's sort of the breakdown of their week?
Yeah, typically we work towards a level 6 and level 7 apprenticeship in our world for the degree apprenticeships. Very similar to Chloe, we have 1 day you'll go off to University of Hertfordshire, 1 day a week, and then 4 days you'll be on rotational placements in MBDA. I guess it might be similar to Chloe possibly, but we have, although it's a 4-year program, typically you'll do rotational placements in all areas of business admin. So again, going back to project management, commercial, etc. So typically you'll do 6-month or 9-month placements, rotational in all those different areas of business admin, as we referred to. But yeah, it's very similar to Chloe, 4 days a week on-site learning and 1 day a week off at the University of Hertfordshire.
Sure. So Chloe, just in your example there, you studied your apprenticeship for how long?
It was just over 12 months that I did mine. It was a level 3.
Level 3. Can you remember what was the title of the actual qualification?
It was level 3 business administration.
Okay, so that's a qualification that you've now got.
Yes.
And I mean, is it helpful with the things that you were learning as part of your college and your studying? Are they things that you can now use when you're working?
Yeah, actually, I think it helped me come in and have a step back and have a bigger picture of the business. Because from colleagues, when I was doing my assignments, I would connect with them, have conversations to obviously be able to complete my assignments. And they would say to me, I've been here for years and I've never taken a step back and thought about it like that before. So it was really, really useful to have the studying alongside just starting in the business to be able to just get that bigger picture.
Yeah. Now, you said that for Monday to Thursday you were working and you were in the office, and then Friday was your study day. Did you find it difficult to juggle those? Were there days when you still needed at work on the Friday, or were there times when you had assignments that you had to do in your own time?
I was tried to be very strict with assignments in my own time. However, it can happen, but it's all about time management. And there were occasions where urgent work would hit the inbox and it would have to be done on a Friday. But I'm very lucky with the company that I work for, and we do work flexibly. So if I needed to work on a Friday, I would just take the time back the week after, take a couple of hours and study on the Monday or the Tuesday or whatever. So yeah.
For sure. Okay. Andy, I wanted to know from an employer's perspective, do you have people that come in and work for you and they go directly into employment without doing that apprenticeship, or would you always want new starters to come in and would you always want to put them on an apprenticeship?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, all of our entry level requirements, if you like, or opportunities are open to those for college, university, and school leavers, of course. And it's usually the only route you can come into on that entry level requirement is for the apprenticeship scheme or the graduate scheme, and so on and so forth, Gareth. So yeah, the answer is it's very hard to get into MBDA as an entry level role, not through these early careers programs.
Yeah,
in fact, it's very, very highly unlikely it's ever going to happen, to be fair, in the short term at least, and medium term.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, Chloe is a shining example here for us. You're still getting paid, but you're learning at the same time. So really, it's a bit of a win-win situation, both for you as the employee and kind of from Andy's perspective from the employer as well. I mean, is that the same with you, Chloe? Are there other entry routes into admin roles in Roche that don't involve an apprenticeship?
Yeah, there are actually. Roche don't require you to do an apprenticeship to be able to get into an admin-based role. It is based on behaviours and mindsets pretty much.
Yeah.
Obviously, the base level, as I said, GCSE, maths and English and IT. But other than that, it's all based on, I mean, if you're someone who can communicate, really, driven to learn, open-minded, you've got a solid chance.
Yeah, good. Well, that's a really good segue into my next question to Andy, which is, look, we've spoken about the qualifications in the academic and A levels or GCSEs that you might have taken, and really we're saying that A levels, which ones you do are irrelevant. But what are the sorts of skills or qualities that you'd be looking for? So when you're looking at someone's application, regardless of what letters and what subjects they did, what's going to stand out to you at that point?
Yeah, it's another great question. I think that for us, I'll go back to the original point about if we put aside the academia piece, what are we looking at? How do we make someone stand out to us compared to somebody else? And it's a great point to make. When we look at the application form in particular, it's using Chloe. Chloe, forgive me for using you as an example, but we have Chloe Mark 1, and Chloe says to us, my GCSEs are X, Y, and Z, and my A levels are this. And we have Chloe Mark 2 that says, well, I've done all of my GCSEs and all my A levels results here. However, then she starts talking about her personality. She talks about kind of how she approaches challenges, how she approaches, how she communicates. Talk about some of the tasks that she's been involved in on a personal level. Maybe there's some tasks around where she works as a team. Start to understand, maybe be very honest with the employer as well with regards to some of the challenges you had, some of the things that didn't work out quite so well. And it seems odd to be that honest with an employer, but employers want to start to understand, look, be honest with what things didn't work out particularly well, and then talk about what the lessons learned, what did you learn from that, how do you adapt the next time it happened. And we start to build a picture to understand the personality and the behaviors behind than just the academia piece. Does that make a little bit of sense? So start to be, we use this cheesy term as being your authentic self, but it's incredibly important to naturally be who you are. Don't hold back. And if you feel there's something that may be a little bit cheesy in your, maybe you may feel, well, I'm doing this as a hobby. That's a little bit cheesy. Why would I want to know that? My advice would be, as an employer, put everything down and let us judge what is relevant or not relevant. We'd rather see too much and you to almost kind of use the word gush about yourself than just hold back and be reserved, because as soon as you do that, you're not selling yourself, and then we don't start to see your behaviors and your strengths, etc., etc.
Yeah, okay. Well, Chloe, can you remember your interview, and can you remember the things that you discussed or the things that you put in your CV or covering letter?
It was over 2 years ago now, which is crazy. But the interview, do you want the whole process?
Well, yeah, I mean, talk to us through the process, because whenever I'm watching this, they are going to be going to their first job fairly soon. So I think it's really useful to hear.
Okay, so I applied through Roche Careers directly, sent in my CV, and I don't think I had to do a cover letter. I think it was just the CV that went in first. I was then contacted by our early careers contact at the time, who sent out to me a video interview, which was a first, one-time only thing that's happened so far. And I had to download this app, and I was sent these videos of people asking the questions. I had to record my answers and send that in. So that was the first stage. And then I was invited in for an assessment centre, which was in person. Again, so alien now in the way that we work, but anyway. I came in, and it was about a 5 or 6 hour day with a couple of other candidates, and we did a group task, and then also had a series of individual interviews with various people as well. And then after that, I then very luckily received an offer.
Okay, and so, I mean, Andy, you've obviously been on the other side of those assessment centres. So what sort of things did it sound like Chloe's employers and recruiters were looking for her? And what is it, do you think, that she did that really impressed them?
I'd imagine it was a lot. So a lot of where employers are going to end up, I think, when we've done this more recently. Again, Chloe, I'm making assumptions about your company as well, but we've moved to a strengths-based approach, and you know, who you are, what is it you enjoy, where's your passion, etc. And again, being your authentic self. So I would say that we are looking for those strengths. So kind of, you know, again, bringing your authentic self, which I know I'll keep referring to, but it's important to say, be honest with what you bring to the assessment centre. I think it's very easy to make assumptions about what you believe the employer wants. My advice would be, get that out of your mind completely. Just come with, be as relaxed as you possibly can, which I know is a little bit tricky than easier said than done. But the point I'm trying to make is that if the employer want to see the authentic self, they will make you comfortable on that assessment day. Okay, it's in their interest to make you as comfortable as they possibly can, so that they can see the true Chloe. Again, Chloe, forgive me for using you as the example, but they want to see you. They don't want you to fail. So we will make it as comfortable as we possibly can for you, so that you are as relaxed as you can in terms of the answers you give us, so we can see what your strengths are, we can see your behaviors, we can see your attitude to learning, etc. So we can make a true judgment on Chloe Mark 2 as opposed to Chloe Mark 1. There's a lot more to it. I've tried to summarize that as really quick as I can. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. By the way, do keep your questions coming in. Now, some of you watching this at the moment, those of you watching it live anyway, you might be about to apply for your first job, or where are we now? February. So some of you may be looking to go for your first job or for an apprenticeship within the next few months. So these are the people to talk to. Put your questions in, ask their advice, because say Chloe's been through it successfully not so long ago, and Andy is going to be an example of someone who is going to be part of that process. So it's going to be him who's going to read your CV, or it's him who's going to be at those assessment centres or on the other side of a table at an interview. So use the questions tab on your board there, type your question in, that will come straight through to us. Andy, just want to touch on the CV again, because I know this is things that often get spoken about in school, kind of do's and don'ts for CVs. So what is it that's really going to turn you off from a CV if it turns up in your inbox?
can I flip it on the application rather than CV, Gav? One of the biggest bugbears, as an employer is, and again, using MEA as an example, we know we're not the only company that exists in the world. Okay, so we know that there's lots of competition out there. They're all fighting for young talent, which is brilliant, right? So you have got either small, medium, or large companies that are all going to be fighting for you guys. I can guarantee it. Okay. Now, one of our biggest bugbears is when you apply for more than one position, and I'm sure many of you will do, and my advice would be, which goes against kind of like our competitors, why would I say this, right? But my advice would be always apply for more than 3 positions if you're applying at any given time, right? Because don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's advice number 1, which some people do. But if you apply for more than one, that's great, but don't go into a copy and paste world. Okay, we and I'm sure Rosh, I'm speaking on behalf of them as well, but MBDA, we want to feel loved, right? So we want to feel as if we're the only company in the world that you've applied for. Okay, we know that's not the case, but when you copy and paste an application form that says, yeah, I'm really passionate about working for Fred Blogs Limited, not MBDA, you've copied and pasted it for another application, that doesn't make us feel particularly great. And also it starts to raise alarm bells with us. There's not great attention to detail, and you're not looking at the application before you send it. And for many of you, I'm sure it's really quite basic stuff, but just be conscious of it, because employers just need to know that, or feel as if we're the only ones that exist in the world, but deep down we know we're not.
Yeah, no, okay. Let me just move the conversation on, and then so I do want to open it up to some questions. So there's some questions already that are coming in. So if there's anything you want to ask, this is your opportunity to do so now. So I can use that questions tab, type your question in there, and then it will come through to me, and I can ask it to either Andy or Chloe. So look, just really want to know about the prospects for business roles. I think we're assuming here that there's always going to be a need for people to fulfill business roles in organisations, Andy. So look, can you confirm that is the case?
Absolutely. We look at 5-year plans in our world, in MBDA, for example, employment 5-year plans, and we just see a healthy upwards trend for business support functions in MBDA. We can't see that changing, irrespective of the success of the business. We're always going to need business professionals. So I can't see that changing for many years.
Okay, and is that your understanding, Chloe, from what you see, that you feel overworked rather than underworked, I presume?
Yeah, I think speaking specifically from an admin perspective, COVID has actually meant that our workload has actually changed and evolved, and it means that we're actually a bit more hands-on with projects and flow into business critical work, and actually becoming a bit more literally hands-on with the business as opposed to being enablers. So yes, I agree. There's always going to be a need, and actually it's actually evolving and becoming even more development opportunities for admins as well.
Okay. Well, from your perspective, Chloe, yes, Andy, yeah, please do.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just one point I think is really worth making as well is as our world evolves and as technology evolves, etc., and again, with that much respect to our employees within MBDA, as the demographic gets ever increasingly older and older throughout, naturally from year to year, we need young people with young ideas and innovation that we typically haven't always got. And we're the first to admit many people who work at MBDA maybe aren't always as up to date with technology as some young people, and that becomes even more crucial why young people become the future of our business and the future of our success, which sounds incredibly cheesy, but it's true. We can't live without young people coming into our business, and if that stops, regrettably our delivery stops by extension. So yeah, I kind of see a healthy future for anyone that wants to get into business admin, that's for sure.
Yeah, okay. Chloe, you've spoken about, you covered some very general areas of business, so maybe you cover a bit of finance, a bit of marketing, and a bit of HR, but do you think there's one area that you really want to specialise in?
I am still finding my passion, if you will, but I'm exposed to so much that it's only going to come up at some point. I do have an interest in project management. That has been a trend throughout my apprenticeship, but I'm just considering my options at the moment and taking my time. And that would be my advice to anyone with anything. Just there's no rush to make these decisions, you know, take your time.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Andy, you spoke about the placements that your apprentices would do, so they'd go around and cover slightly different areas of there. But is there one that perhaps people were more drawn to or more excited by?
Yeah, great question. I would probably say project management and sales and business development, I would suggest, are probably the two that probably stand out. When we look at business in general, I think we get more questions from parents, and students in particular around those two key areas, I would suggest. Probably not so much procurement and supply chain, I would argue. Also, just to add to Chloe's point, there's always a healthy interest in human resources, HR, definitely.
Yeah,
A passion,
yeah.
you know.
Sure, so that's possibly a good route to get into. Okay, right, I'm going to go to some of the questions that have been submitted. So again, if you've got a question, this is your opportunity to do so. There's a couple of questions which are kind of similarly worded, so I'm going to ask you. Essentially, it's, would you recommend doing business studies at A level? What do you think, Andy, first of all, then I'll ask Chloe.
Yeah, the obvious answer is yes, absolutely. Although we don't ask for business A levels as part of our entry requirements, I think clearly just having an appreciation of basic principles, and maybe understanding of maybe basic terminology, I think it would be very helpful. It wouldn't stop you coming into our business. And just to add as well, if you had a business A level and somebody who didn't, does that give you an advantage? No, it doesn't. For us, we don't use that as an advantage. You know, we generally look beyond the academia, which I've mentioned before.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Chloe, of course, you didn't do business studies at A level, but you weren't necessarily thinking about business admin as a career at that point. But do you think, in hindsight, you'd go back, or would you recommend someone watching this at the moment who thought this was a career, it might be a good subject to do?
I would say if you have an interest and a passion for it, then go for it. But if you're doing it just to help you get into business admin, then it's not worth it. Follow your passions, do what you enjoy. Don't just take a subject just because you think it's going to help you. That would be my advice.
That's a great point.
Do you know, I mean, that's a very consistent answer across a number of different webinars we've done covering a range of different careers. Another question here. If I'm working in business, does that mean I have to start making money for my company? Andy, is there any income generation expected of business? I think some people hear the word business and they're assuming it's about going out and trading, but does that come into it at all?
No, the honest answer is, in the MBA world, you certainly wouldn't be expected to hit any kind of goals in terms of financial goals or expectations. You know, to give you a good example, sales and business development, I'm sure most of you know kind of a rough idea what that is, but you know, it is the business that will go out and win the business on behalf of MBDA, right? So, but you wouldn't never ever be put in a situation at entry level, and for many years after, actually, where you have that responsibility for ownership of targets at that point. It doesn't work like that. Certainly for the first 4 years in your apprenticeship scheme, that would never be put on you, that's for sure.
Okay, fine. And another question, which my lights have just gone out, so I'll ask the question, then I'll deal with that. So apologies if you're looking at me as a silhouette. Chloe, the question is, you work for a pharmaceutical company, but how much did you know about pharmaceuticals before you got the job?
In terms of drug development, I knew absolutely nothing. I did work for Boots before, so I had, you know, that kind of the very end level of over-the-counter and prescription medicines from a patient perspective and a pharmacy perspective, but drug development, absolutely nothing. And to be honest, if you were to quiz me on it now, I would struggle because it does get technical. At the end of the day, I'm here to do my job, and as long as I've got an understanding of what the business does and what we're here to do, which is to create drugs for the patient, that's what matters.
Yeah, and I guess there's a balance here, because to a certain extent, we could put Chloe into perhaps any business admin role across any company, whether that was, you know, a film studio like Warner Brothers or Tesco's Retails or MBDA or Roche, and she'd carry out her role probably in much the same way. So there's probably not that need to have that prior knowledge of a particular industry, but you also alluded to the fact that you perhaps should do your homework beforehand. So where for you would be that balance between how much someone would know about the day-to-day operations of MBDA?
I guess when we talk about people that have an interest in MBDA or coming into MBDA, first and foremost, just going back to the original point, that you have transferable skills, which Chloe's alluded to. You know, if you left defence in our world and went into Roche, or you went from Roche into worked for Tesco, for example, in the head office, for example, you know, there are transferable skills. You know, you're not going to be held back because you've worked in defence or in pharmaceutical. It does, you know, certainly in business admin roles, that definitely isn't the case. So I think that's worth stressing as well. What's the second part? Remind me again, Gareth, the second part of that question again.
So it's just finding that balance between how much would you expect someone to know really about a company, or how sort of generic is the roles that someone in business admin does.
Going back to my original point about kind of wanting MBDA to feel loved when you apply for us, I guess, you know, if you come into our assessment well, for example, you get that far, which hopefully many of you will, just do a little bit of basic homework about who we are, the size of the company, locations, etc. We don't expect you to know everything about defence. You know, we don't. That truly isn't one of the things that we ask you about. Again, go back to Chloe's point, which is a really good point. You know, as long as you can demonstrate there's a passion and a desire and a want, and also you've considered the rationale about why MBDA, why business, why the apprenticeship scheme, and so on and so forth. That's kind of all we're looking for at that point. We don't need you to be to have a passion for defence. Sometimes engineers, for example, in our world need to have a passion for a specific area of engineering, and that's fine. We'll question people around that maybe, but when it comes to business, we're just looking for that overall kind of want, desire, passion, consideration for what we can offer. That's it.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty clear. I think this is the final question. I can't see if there's any more coming through. It's a really good question, actually. How do I find an apprenticeship? So what do they do, Andy? Should people just be finding, typing in Roche or MBDA and looking at their careers pages, or is there another way of finding apprenticeship positions?
It's a great question. On a national basis, well, firstly, our MBDA careers website, same with Roche, I'm sure. You go to our careers website, that's the obvious, most direct route you can find. On a national level, we link up with lots of apprenticeship job boards, but the obvious one is National Apprenticeship Service, which is led by the government. That's where most employers will list their apprenticeship schemes every year, including MBDA. And Chloe, you're nodding, so I assume Roche as well do the same. And more locally, of course, HOP is a great example. Maybe more locally, we advertise our apprenticeship schemes on HOP as well, and that's again a great place to go in terms of not just finding the roles, but understanding about companies and apprenticeship schemes in particular, what apprenticeships can offer you longer term as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then Chloe, just remind us, how did you find your position in the first place?
Mine was through Roche Careers directly. I actually didn't know about the National Apprenticeship portal until after I was secured, so definitely look on there.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Okay, well, look, I can't see any more questions coming through, so I'm going to assume that's all that we've had. So thank you so much for those of you that have submitted those questions, and I hope we've been able to answer them for you. On your screen at the moment, you will see details of that HOP website that Andy just mentioned there, and those social media handles. So do go and have a look at those. The QR code, which I'll leave up there for a few more seconds, that would take you directly to the page where all of these webinars, we've been recording these webinars since about May 2020, so just coming up to 2 years. So there's a different one every week. You may well find out there are other careers that you're interested in finding out about where you could watch the video similar to this. So we spoke about careers in HR earlier, because that's a function of business admin. We did a webinar on HR. We did one on law last week. So if not you might find that one of your friends or one of your family members would find those useful. So do spend some time having a look at the HOP webpage. So well done, and thank you to all of you that have logged on to watch this one live. Thank you to all of you that are watching this back. But most of all, let me thank our panelists, Andy and Chloe, for giving up their time today to share their own knowledge and experience. So thanks ever so much to the pair of you for coming on this afternoon.
Pleasure.
Let me just wish the best of you, wish the rest of you the very, very best with your next career decisions and the next steps that you take. Do use HOP as a bit of a sounding board as well. Hope you've enjoyed today, and very best of luck. Good evening.